and welcome to today's show. I have veteran congressional correspondent and campaign reporter turned co-author of my favorite daily newsletter, the brilliant and hilarious Sam Youngman. Man, is this guy funny and smart consistently today and whenever I talk to him, and every day when I read my favorite newsletter, today's big stuff. Sam Youngman is joining me again. Very excited to have Sam back. I think you're going to like my conversation with him. As always, it begins at 20 minutes in here. But first, a cavalcade, an avalanche, a blizzard of news and audio for you here in today's news segment. And it is Thursday, so I'll be hosting a live hangout on Zoom this evening, as I do pretty much every Thursday at 8 Eastern. If you are a stand-up community member, subscriber, in good standing, you should be getting an invitation in your email. If for some reason you are not, you can always email me and I'll send you the link. standupwithpete@gmail.com. That's tonight at 8 East. Now let's take a look at what happened yesterday. Time for news and notes, everything that happened in the last 24 hours, as far as I can see in hopefully under 20 minutes. Let's get to it. The latest from yet two more shootings in the United States of gun violence. A college campus shooting. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas had an active shooter on the campus yesterday. Very scary for students on that campus, including the daughter of a regular listener of ours. Thinking about you, Christine and Jane. Luckily, she's okay. Physically, at least. Multiple people were killed. Two senior law enforcement officials briefed on the matter told NBC News. Police said the suspect was located and is dead. Also, in Texas, a suspect is in custody after 6 people were killed and 3 were injured in homicides and shootings near San Antonio and Austin on Tuesday, according to authorities there. I mean, I know I said 2 more shootings in the United States of America. There were several more than that yesterday, but those were obviously high-profile shootings that got a lot of media attention yesterday. Saying it that way made me want to look up the exact numbers on daily gun violence in America. According to our friends over at BradyUnited.org, every day 327 people are shot in the United States. Among those, 117 people are shot and killed. 210 survive gunshot injuries. 90 are intentionally shot by someone else and survive. 46 are murdered. 67 die from gun suicide. 10 survive an attempted gun suicide. 1 is killed unintentionally. 90 are shot unintentionally and survive. 2 are killed by legal intervention. 4 are shot by legal intervention and survive. 1 died, but the intent was unknown. And 12 are shot and survived, but the intent was unknown. And those are just the daily statistics overall, and crazy to read that list. But I still don't want it to scare you from living your life in what seems like a daily nightmare, and that's not why I read it. Get out there, do what you do that brings you joy and alleviates suffering without having to have that be the concern. At least that's what I tell myself every day as my kids go off to school. I mean, I guess it's pretty safe for me in the shed, but, you know, there's people here that don't like me. What am I talking about? Okay, just don't feed the wrong wolf. You know what I'm saying, right? All right, moving on. What else do I have for you? At this point, I'm sure you probably heard about former President Trump refusing to rule out abusing power if he's elected president. The Colorado Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case challenging Trump's eligibility to appear on the state's ballot in 2024. 10 Wisconsin Republicans who pose as fake electors for Trump admitted that Biden did win the state in 2020, and a Nevada grand jury charged 6 Republicans who acted as fake Trump electors in the scheme to overturn Biden's 2020 election win. Taylor Swift is Time's Person of the Year, and right-wingers who for some reason hate her. I guess she's an outspoken person. I wasn't going to say progressive necessarily, but she certainly has strong progressive opinions on some things like gun violence and sexism and other things. I'm sure I don't pay that much attention, but apparently right-wingers are really pissed that she was Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And so is George Santos, I think. I heard he thought he had it locked up. I didn't hear that. But I did read that George Santos made more than his congressional salary of $170,000 in like 2 days or a few days on Cameo, making videos for people, you know, Cameo, the personal videos that you can have made for you. That is a crazy statistic. He made that much? Who's paying that guy to do cameos? That much? Wow. And one of the guys who enabled George Santos for so long, former Speaker of the House for like 2 Scaramucci's, hollow barrel Kevin McCarthy, who said he would never quit Congress or announce he'd be retiring. And last night there was a Republican debate on News Nation. Did you watch it? I'm planning to watch it, but I won't have anything from it for today's news segment because it's happening actually the same time I'm doing this, and there's just no time. It's too late to get that in here, but I'm sure we'll recap it tomorrow and at the Hangout. I'll wonder if they'll ask what it feels like to be second to Donald Trump still at this point. And people are saying Megyn Kelly is one of the moderators, even though she doesn't work at the network that is hosting it, News Nation. They're saying that she's made a comeback somehow as a result of her moderating this campaign. I wonder if she'll ask the very important question of what color is Santa? Is he black or white? You tell me. And I suppose one of the most important stories of the day, the U.S. Senate voted down Ukraine aid despite the president's plea yesterday afternoon. The Senate Republicans blocked a sweeping spending bill to fund the ongoing war effort in Ukraine and help Israel fight Hamas over objections that the legislation failed to do enough to clamp down on American border security. Hours before the bill's demise, President Biden pleaded in a televised speech for Republicans to pass the $111 billion package, including $50 million for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel. He said he'd be willing to make significant compromises on border provisions if Republicans would support the funding for Ukraine. President Biden also warned that a failure to provide aid for Ukraine could enable President Vladimir Putin of Russia to reclaim momentum in the war and even draw American troops. This cannot wait, President Biden said. Highly unlikely, apparently, that this is going to get done before the end of the year. Parties are still very far apart on matters related to how and where migrants are detained or released in the U.S. So that's pretty upsetting news to hear, I think. I think that especially with Russia, they need that funding. Rather, Ukraine needs that funding to fight Russia very badly. Israel, for its part, still hunting Hamas leaders as Gazans, for their part, are struggling for refuge, according to the headline over at the New York Times. Israel's offensive has forced thousands more Palestinians to flee, many to southern border of Rafah, where the UN has said that shelters are packed beyond capacity. Some have been forced to sleep in the street, and the feeling of imminent death, they say, is widespread. War and conflict and conditions in Gaza continue to be absolutely horrific for those poor people. And I guess the final news headline I wanted to share, I'm sure at this point you heard that the legend Norman Lear passed away, the great television writer and producer who reigned at the top of American television through the 70s and early 80s, died yesterday at the age of 101. The New York Times obituary, in part, reads, Lear left a lasting mark with shows like The Jeffersons and Good Times, but his crowning achievement was All in the Family. The show's main character, Archie Bunker, was an oaf and a bigot, but a richly human one. Inspired in part by his experience as a Jew in America, Norman Lear imagined populist TV as a form of patriotic dissent, embodying a spirit of big-hearted 20th century liberalism, just part of the obituary in the New York Times. But man, we're all touched by his work and his life, so that was very sad to see him go, even at the age of 101. The great Norman Lear. Jeffersons was by far my favorite sitcom for years. As a young person, I loved watching that show. My brother and I would scream laugh. The great Norman Lear, rest in peace and power and creativity. Such an important American. Actually, should have mentioned, I got to interview him over the phone in 2015. I almost forgot that, but I should try to find that audio. It's probably pretty hard for me to find at this point, but it was a real honor for me, and I remember being real nervous and preparing a lot to interview him, even over by the phone. Real cool. Anyway, moving on. Lastly, a couple more headlines that I just found. Let's see. NASA said it would land astronauts on the moon by December 2025. That's pretty cool. And the Biden administration delayed a decision years in the making on whether to ban menthol cigarettes, which is controversial for some complicated reasons. And that is all I've got for you on headlines. But now it's time to recap the day in audio, my favorite audio clips from yesterday. And you can always send me your ideas for news, notes, and audio. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Let's see. First, when I started this, I didn't think I was going to be able to get any debate audio from last night, but I kind of am doing two things at once. And I did see this moment and want to include it because I thought it was pretty great here for Chris Christie to stand up for Nikki Haley on stage against Vivek Ramaswamy's consistent sexism in this case against her. And I agree with every word he said and how he said it. And Nikki Haley definitely appreciated it.
Let me just say something here. You know, his reasonable peace deal in Ukraine, he made it clear. Give them all the land they've already stolen. promise Putin you'll never put Ukraine in Russia, and then trust Putin not to have a relationship with China. Let me tell you something. That's no reasonable.
That's not my deal. That's not my deal.
Yes, it's exactly what you said. You do this at every debate.
I'll tell you exactly what it is.
Don't interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. Okay? You say this. You do this. You do this at every debate. You go out on the stump and you say something. All of us see it on video. We confront you out on the debate stage. You say you didn't say it, and then you back away. And I want to say what?
Exactly what I said, Chris.
I'm not done yet.
Well, this is
now look.
This is nonsense. This man is spewing. This man is spewing nonsense.
Let me tell you something. This is the fourth debate. The fourth debate that you would be voted in the first 20 minutes as the most obnoxious blowhard in America. So shut up for a little while.
I'm going to respond to that.
Your version.
We're going to let you respond to that. We're going to let you respond to that. Let him finish.
I want to say something else. We're now 25 minutes into this debate, and he has insulted Nikki Haley's basic intelligence, not her positions, her basic intelligence. She doesn't know regions. She wouldn't be able to find something on a map that his 3-year-old could find. Look, if you want to disagree on issues, that's fine. And Nikki and I disagree on some issues. But I'll tell you this, I've known her for 12 years, which is longer than he's even started to vote in a Republican primary. And while we disagree about some issues and we disagree about who should be president of the United States, what we don't disagree on is this is a smart, accomplished woman, and you should stop insulting her.
So I'm going to take this.
Oh, wow. The audience is definitely with Nikki Haley and anybody who might support her at last night's News Nation debate. But lest you start to think that Nikki Haley is a decent person, and I don't think probably most of you listening quite think that, but let's not forget just how extreme she is in this 5-second clip alone, where she says that Ron DeSantis's "don't say gay" bill didn't go far enough because she really needs to win over that anti-gay Republican base to win the primaries.
I actually said his "don't say gay" bill didn't go far enough.
Didn't go far enough. Thanks, Nikki Haley. All right, well, that's about all I got, I think, for the debate. We'll see if anything comes on before I'm finished here. But I do want to make sure that I play this clip. This is one of the most important things I saw rattling around in social media yesterday, flagged by Right Wing Watch First. Here is the current Speaker of the House. That's right, Republican Mike Johnson, I guess is his name. He told a gathering of Christian nationalists last night that weeks before he became House Speaker, quote, "The Lord told me very clearly to prepare to become a Moses who will lead the nation through a Red Sea moment." He said that. Dave Rothkopf says, "We're in deep trouble, folks. I'm not sure we realize just how deep. This guy is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs." Here it is for your own ears to burn. I mean, that's some very, very bizarre shit for anybody to say. I'm sorry. I hope you're not offended if you're a devout religious person. But even if you are, I bet you don't think the Lord speaks to you that clearly with that kind of message. That shit is crazy, right? Does anybody not think that is crazy? Am I out of bounds here? Here's more. I mean, if anybody heard that, how do they not think that the guy's crazy? He just articulated an actual conversation that he had with the Lord, right? Isn't that delusionary? Isn't that a sign of delusion? Wouldn't a psychiatrist say, "Listen, I think we gotta check you in"? Nope. Let's make him Speaker of the House. Okay, moving on. Can you move on? We have to move on. I'm doing a show. But seriously, I think he compared himself to Moses just then. Didn't it seem like, okay, how about something that won't trigger and scare you, but might make you a little prouder? I don't know. It's kind of pathetic, unfortunately, what Congressman Jim McGovern was commenting on, so maybe it won't. But he unloaded on Republicans ahead of a censure vote regarding one of his Democratic colleagues. Congressman Jamal Bowman falsely pulled a fire alarm at the Capitol, remember that, before a vote on the government funding bill. Well, he's pled guilty to one local criminal charge. The lawmaker said he pulled the alarm by mistake. Many Republicans aren't buying that explanation, but Congressman McGovern, during this censure vote, spoke on the floor to table the censure resolution, a vote that failed, paving the way for a final vote on whether to censure, which is just a form of public rebuke. Lawmakers don't actually face any material consequences from such a resolution, but I just love this from one of my favorite congressmen from Massachusetts' 2nd District. Tough fighting second, as Colbert used to say. Here's James McGovern going scorched earth on the Republican majority.
Our gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is a profoundly stupid resolution. Under Republican control, this chamber has become a place where trivial issues get debated passionately and important ones not at all. Republicans have focused more on censuring people in this Congress than passing bills that help people we represent or improving this country in any way. What a waste of time and money. They have turned this place into a joke. They came into the majority talking a big game, but have delivered nothing, not a single damn thing. They talk about passing this and passing that. All their hyper-partisan bills are going nowhere. What we're now doing is distracting from the fact that the Republican agenda has been a total and complete failure. The list of the least productive Congress in history, the most rules failed in a single year. They dragged America to the brink of default twice, almost shut down the government, wasted weeks fighting about who should be Speaker, hitting each other in the hallways, and it's all because we should be talking about important issues in this chamber, Mr. Speaker. We should be addressing health care costs, helping Americans build economic security, competing with our adversaries abroad, and investing in our people at home. We just had a shooting in Las Vegas tonight. We should be talking about preventing gun violence in this country. And you have us here talking about how someone tried to go out the wrong door of the Cannon House office building. I mean, honestly, what the hell is wrong with you? Congressman Bowman apologized. And
all right, there you go. Wasn't that great? James McGovern lighting them up yesterday. All right, I love to end the news segment with some laughs, and these ones are brought to you by ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live and his excellent writers. Here's Kimmel last night in his monologue making fun of Orange Jesus.
Donald Trump was up very late last night thumbing out a rebuttal to a story in the new book by former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. At 12:56 a.m., he posted, "Crazy Liz Cheney, who suffers from Trump derangement syndrome at a level rarely seen before, writes in her boring new book that Kevin McCarthy said he came to Mar-a-Lago after the rigged election because the former president was depressed and not eating." That statement is not true. I was not depressed. I was angry, and it was not that I was not eating. It was that I was eating too much. That's why they sent Kevin in. For once, I believe him, by the way. I don't know. Why would he mention this? I don't get. He can't reason. Whatever someone says, he has to say the opposite. He can't help it. Call him unstable, call him dumb. He says, I'm a stable genius. You mentioned his crowd size was small. He says it was the biggest crowd in history. Say he wasn't eating. He says, I was eating too much for no reason. I would like to have some fun with this and see what we can get him to contradict. Like I say, Trump looks terrible in women's shoes. And he's like, no one looks better than Trump in women's shoes. When I wear pumps, people come up and they come up with tears in their eyes, say, sir, we've never seen calves as sexy as yours. And he went on, he said, but that's not why Kevin McCarthy was there. He was at Mar-a-Lago to get my support and to bring the Republican Party together. Only, well, in that case, file that under wasted trip because Trump misspelled Kevin 2 times in one post. The guy who's constantly questioning Biden's mental sharpness cannot spell one of Not only one of the most common names in the world, also the name of his co-star in Home Alone 2. Okay?
All right. Jimmy Kimmel. Very funny. Crazy that Donald Trump actually did write that on social media. All right, well, that is today's news. How about it? How'd you like it? I know people have been very vocal. To be fair, I've been begging for compliments on the news segment. I appreciate it. standupwithpete@gmail.com or leave a comment on the show. If you're a subscriber on the Patreon post, always listen to the show on a podcast app like Apple iTunes or Spotify. Many of you are sending me your Spotify rap list, proving that this is the most popular podcast that you listen to, or this is the podcast you listen to the most, I guess is what I meant. All right, but now it's time to get to my guest. I love this guy. He is one of my favorite people to talk to. Every time I talk to him, I'm like, why don't I have that guy on more? He's real smart and real funny. Like I told you, he is a former Washington insider, a congressional reporter. He covered campaigns. He covered the White House. I followed him way back then, but he left it all to head into academia and do something different and better in his own opinion. We talked about that the first time he was on. Now he's the co-creator and co-author of my favorite daily newsletter, amongst other jobs that he has. But today's big stuff is simply awesome. You've heard me talk about it, I'm sure, before. If you're a regular listener to this show, go to todaysbigstuff.com and subscribe right now. You won't be sorry. Listen to the partner podcast that Sam hosts. Ladies and gentlemen, I love talking to him. I love following him on social media. And I love today's big stuff. At Sam Youngman joins me now. Oh, yeah, there he is. Handsome Sam Youngman, the co-creator, co-author of my favorite daily newsletter, Today's Big Stuff. Welcome back, sir.
Pete, it's so great to be with you, buddy. Handsome Sam, I promise you, is not a nickname I've heard before.
Come on. Well, I think you're traditionally good looking. No, you don't think so? You haven't been told that you have traditional?
First time today. It's a big day for me. I really appreciate you.
Oh, very exciting. You better get outside so people can see what you have to offer. It's great to see you. It's always great to read the daily newsletter, but you guys continue to crush it over there. But just remind people what they're going to get when they subscribe to this, because I love over promoting even with you this newsletter. That's how much I love it.
Man, I really appreciate that. You've always been so supportive. I feel like the first thing we should tell people they're going to get is lots and lots of cussing. We like the profanity and we use an excessive amount. We like to think we're doing it to make our point. But the truth of the matter is we started this newsletter for a few friends during the height of the Trump administration. And frankly, the amount of profanity didn't seem that excessive at the time. It seemed just kind of perfect, really. But no, we like to have a good time. We like lots of F-bombs and lots of poop jokes, and we're trying to laugh through some scary times and remind people that whatever they're feeling, they're not alone in feeling it.
I would like to perform from the opening of today's newsletter, of Today's Big Stuff, because you're jumping out here. You're opening up the newsletter with the news. I didn't even know this, but apparently Chuck Schumer, who of course the Senate Majority Leader, he awarded the quote golden gavel to the Vice President Kamala Harris. She of course is a former senator, but the reason he gave her this is because she made history with the most tie-breaking votes of any vice president ever. And you guys at Today Big Stuff have an exclusive quote from her. How did you get it?
Well, we worked our sources, and when that didn't work, we just made it up.
So here it is. Here it is. Here's, if you don't mind, I'll just read.
No, please.
This is Vice President Harris thanking the Majority Leader when she got the golden gavel yesterday. Apparently, she said, "Thank you, Chuck. Wow, what an honor. It's funny to think that if I were to hit myself in the head with this golden gavel about 100 times, then I would be just as smart as many senators are now. What a goddamn disgrace this place is. Did you all know there's a U.S. fucking senator named Mark Wayne? It's not even two separate names. It's pushed together like his family tree. What a bunch of idiots. Like, seriously, I had to come up here and break a million ties because why? Josh Hawley was too busy peeing himself to do the right thing? Because Tommy Tuberville couldn't stop sucking for like 5 fucking minutes? Is Joe Manchin here? Oh, hey, Joe. Hey, get fucked, asshole. Are you gone yet? Anyway, thanks for wasting my time with this silly shit when y'all could have just done the right thing every time, dumbasses.
Wow.
Wow. Really well done.
Sam, but I'm surprised that's not getting more traction, that she said all those really terrible things. She sounded very angry.
Yeah, no, this was an exclusive look at the remarks she was going to give. I think she actually gave much more classy and dignified remarks instead. But yeah, sometimes we get a look at these things. Just recently we had an interview with God. One of the lawmakers had invoked God. And so we reached out to God to see, what she thought. And she said, no, that lawmaker's full of shit. We didn't talk at all.
That's what God said. She said that her pronouns are he, she, her. Damn it, I
absolutely.
fucked it up.
Didn't you know?
I assumed.
I mean, that kind of intelligence you wouldn't usually assign to.
The joke about God's gender can go many different ways, but it would seem that God is kind of a dick. So sometimes with, a lot of the bad things that happen, he's so in control of. But let's leave that for others to decide, because I want to ask you about important real issues that you're writing about every day. The great thing about talking to Sam Youngman is he knows what's going on. He has the credibility and experience of a Washington reporter, but also a really thoughtful sense of humor. And so I wanted to get into it with you. First of all, let's just talk about one of the most relevant. And there's a lot happening the last, week. There always seems to be. But Kevin McCarthy has announced he is going to quit. What are your thoughts on his resignation?
Well, Pete, I'm going to need you to remind me who that is. I have already forgotten who Kevin. I'm sorry, you said McDaniel?
He's a hollow barrel. He's like if you look at him, you can look right down the middle and see nothing. Yeah. Does that jog your memory?
Yeah, no, that rings a bell. Guy, he was Speaker of the House for like 15, 20 minutes, right? Yeah. Now, my favorite story about Kevin McCarthy, and Eric Swalwell tells this story, is that McCarthy found out during the Trump years that Trump's favorite candy was Starburst, but he only liked the red and the pink ones, which, by the way, is like the only sane thing I've ever heard about Donald Trump. But yeah, McCarthy would apparently hunt down only red and pink Starburst and then deliver them to, his orange god. And I just thought, that goes beyond like normal ass kissing. That's like professional all-star Hall of Fame level ass kissing. So yeah, if we're going to remember Kevin McCarthy at all, and we won't, it'll be for stuff like that.
I love how Republican presidents love like sugary, childish candy. I just like Reagan.
Jelly beans and
jelly beans. Like Obama was like, I always had a bowl of fucking apples in there, and he had a body that looked like it. Anyway. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, but we also heard that Kevin McCarthy apparently went down there. Liz Cheney's new book. First of all, what is your reaction to Liz Cheney and writing this book? What are your general thoughts about her and how she's come out of all of this? She's on with Rachel Maddow the other night.
Yeah, no, she's on TV more than Taylor Swift. Not, but thank God. Look, I feel about Liz Cheney the same way I feel about hunting with Dick Cheney. It makes me nervous. It's look, I'm grateful for any voice who's speaking out about the dangers that Donald Trump represents. I'm grateful for any voice that says, hey, January 6th was kind of fucked up. But when you start talking about a third party race, I don't know that you're helping anybody other than Donald Trump. So I don't know. She's a welcome voice to me. She's also somebody who voted with Trump like 92% of the time. So, I tend to be leery of these things, but I'll take as many voices of outrage as I can these days.
Yeah, fair enough. By the way, what did you think, speaking of voices of outrage, you made that joke about Mark Wayne. I hadn't talked to you in a while, and I forget what you wrote about it. I'm sure you did. About the almost physical fight between those two douchebags. And yes, I'm calling the Teamster. Like he's just almost as equal. It's just that, these are both, if the Teamsters president was a woman, I'm sorry, that probably wouldn't have happened. But what did you make of the senator, who's much worse, standing up and challenging him to a physical fight? That felt like a new-ish low.
Yeah, I feel like we've had like 15 new lows already today, and it's barely, it's not even 2:00 in the afternoon.
Right.
Look, the Senate used to be, and when I say this charitably, it used to be the august body, right? The House is where you went to be a knucklehead. The Senate was where you went to be a serious person. I think we can safely say that era has passed, if it ever really existed in the first place. But, look, you start electing guys named Mark Wayne, that's what you're going to get. This is not the first time he's made an ass of himself in the United States Senate. It won't be the last, but, is he any worse than Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley or Rick Scott? Probably not. He just, he does it. He just makes an ass of himself with a flourish.
Yeah, well, at best, the difference, I'll give him a little credit, is Mark Wayne Mullen was actually a former like MMA fighter. And the guys you mentioned are all talk. Like Ted Cruz, you ever seen him like with the basketball against Kimmel? Like Kimmel's not a great athlete, but Ted Cruz looks terrible. And obviously Josh Hawley, he's like...
he's a runner.
They can't fight. No runner. Have you ever seen a runner try to fight? They're so sinewy.
No, I'm just, that footage of him on January 6th sprinting and, he leaving a nice yellow trail behind him.
All right. Well, the two big stories in the last 24 hours and probably should be considered bigger stories for a while, I think, are Donald Trump sitting in Davenport, Iowa with his sponsor, Sean Hannity, and Hannity asking him about the concerns of him becoming a dictator if he were to be reelected. And the other big news story is MAGA Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, wanting to protect the identities of people breaking into the U.S. Capitol. Let's take the first one first. How big of a story you think that answer he gave, I'd be dictator the first day, just the first day, and just the overall concern that is a real concern. The Atlantic magazine apparently is dedicating the entire issue about this concern of his future authoritarian aspirations.
Yeah, well, I want to give sort of, a reserved and, dignified answer here and just tell you I am freaked the fuck out. I mean, look, they're saying the quiet part out loud, and then they're just screaming, hell yeah, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. He got asked twice. The first time he didn't answer it. He just talked about being indicted 91 times. And the second time he said, oh, I love this guy. Yeah, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. And it's like, well, shit, that's pretty scary. What do you do on day two? I think the reason I'm grateful for this is he sort of put the mainstream media in a position where they can't really ignore this stuff anymore. You mentioned the Atlantic. We've seen so many ridiculous Atlantic pieces the last few years about cancel culture and shit like that. And now it's sort of become so clear and so obvious and so in your face, Trump's retribution efforts, that it's, even the New York Times is having to reckon with this after, years of both sides bullshit. And it's like, hey, he's not pretending. Why would anybody else?
I sometimes wonder and wish that people in the media, commentators, analysts, quote experts, would get credit based on what they said was going to happen and lose credit based on what they said was going to happen. Whether it's an economist talking about a recession or someone like me early on calling Donald Trump a white supremacist to NBC News anchor Katie Tur, and she was aghast. She was aghast that I was saying that because, of course, she had great access to him early on. But I want the authoritarian experts to be given credit for predicting this happening, and I want people, serious, thoughtful analysts at the New York Times, CNN, or other political media outlets to lose credit for not predicting it. That's what I want, Sam.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like a weatherman, right? Like you should be able to look at a weatherman's forecast or a weather person's forecast and be like, okay, you got this many days right, you got this many days wrong. This is the score you get. And, the reality is most weathermen are doing way better than our political pundits are, because there was that, that knee-jerk impulse to show everybody just how fair they can be. Yeah. So that when somebody like you said, hey, it's raining outside, and they said, whoa, be easy. We don't know what that wet stuff coming from the sky is. And so, you're right. There's been so much truth sacrificed in the last few years in the name of false objectivity that, a lot of these folks, I think, owe us an apology, or at least owe us getting it right going forward.
The best way to forecast whether or not someone's a white supremacist, at least for me, is when I talk to all the black people, speak to all of them, and they're all like, yeah, this is the thing. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Not all of the black people thought that. Who didn't? A lot of the ones that had great plum jobs on panels that didn't want to say what they knew probably was true. And then now they can say a lot more easier. But if you want to know if the guy is liked or supported in this case, by people of color, just go talk to them. They'll tell you. That's where I got it from. And yet they don't want to say it because it's such a serious accusation. And not just white supremacy, all this stuff about authoritarianism. All right, I'm rambling. I mean, I think this
you're fine. Well, I mean, you could also just say, hey, who was the number one person demanding to see Barack Obama's birth certificate? Oh yeah, it was Donald Trump. I mean,
it was.
You don't do that because you're just suddenly so concerned about citizenship.
It's three things. That was the primary one. That was a racist thing to do and say. But the other one was, of course, the systemic racism which they participated in with the not renting to black folks. He and his dad. The other one is you could just look into his dad, who apparently was like involved with the Klan. The other one is the Central Park Five one. Yeah. And the last one, which is funny but true, is that his only black friends were famous athletes and Don King. Like if those are your black friends, maybe, it's because they're somehow famous and powerful and influential. You don't actually know any black folks that don't quite work for you or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if America electing its first black president broke your brain, then you might be a racist. It's pretty damn simple.
Right,
if you all of a sudden decided, hey, you know what, Russia isn't so bad. Maybe we can work with them because, they didn't elect a black president. Then, yeah, maybe you're a fucking racist.
The other big story, as I mentioned, is Mike Johnson, new Speaker of the House. Have we talked? I don't think we've talked, but
I don't think so. Yeah.
Your overall reaction. Now, do you use any accountability apps with your parents about if you're looking at porn? Have you ever done that, or what do you think about that?
No.
Oh.
The idea, frankly, horrifies me beyond belief. Right. I don't want to know that much about Mike Johnson and his kids and their relationship. What the fuck is wrong with these people? Like, I just, first of all, why can't they be repressed and not talk about this shit with their families like the rest of us? Damn it. It's just be normal. Stay out of our bedrooms. Well, stay out of our brains.
But this is the thing I've said. Listeners heard me, but I'm outraged over the idea that any culture, religion, ideology thinks or believes or supports the idea that you tell your kids about anything about your sex life. I mean, if you tell them a little bit and you joke around, whatever, but like serious stuff, that's, especially if they're kids or young, like that's crazy. Knowing about your kids' sex, that's fine. That's sex positive parenting potentially, that they feel comfortable talking to you about that stuff and it's okay for you to know. But to know about your kid, that's just so weird. And I'm finding out that maybe it's not with a certain group of evangelicals, but I still want to ask you, why is that not a bigger thing about him every day? Why don't we have to know? Did your son know if you were looking at porn?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. To me, this is sort of like the Jim Jordan wrestling thing. It's like that thing that everybody knows and is creeped out about. Right. But for some reason, we're not talking about it 24/7. But I think part of the problem is, there's no question that Mike Johnson is an absolute right-wing freak show who wants to put the government in your bedroom. But the bigger problem is nobody knows who the hell he is. We've had like a dozen Speaker of the Houses in the last year. There was somebody, Patrick McKinnon or somebody who was Speaker of the House for like 10 minutes. I think people just tuned it out and they saw, just a general clown show. And they don't know. First of all, his name's Mike Johnson. It might as well be Fred Smith. Right. Like, try to Google that son of a bitch. Like, good luck. It's just, I don't know how you make this stuff stick and get people to be appropriately freaked the fuck out when they don't know who he is.
On this issue, that's very true. We're finding out who he is. That's trickling out. And I sometimes, one of these things that intrepid reporters or just about anybody that looks into his past or knew him years ago find and they put out there. And I just feel like they don't get enough attention in terms of, you can explain this maybe. I mean, is it possible that congressional reporters that have access to yelling a question to Mike Johnson because they have a badge to be there, they don't want to ask him these things because they won't have access anymore? Isn't that how it works to a certain extent?
Oh, I think that's absolutely how it works. I look at somebody like Jake Sherman at Punch Bowl, which is just a Capitol Hill insider Republication. Yesterday, Mike Johnson says, hey, we're blurring the faces of the January 6th terrorists because we don't want them getting charged by DOJ. And Jake Sherman's response was, oh, interesting. Interesting? Are you fucking kidding me? It's a lot more than interesting. It's shocking. It's horrifying. It's obstruction of justice. It's un-American. It's a hell of a lot more than interesting. And I don't know. You're right. Access is a big part of it. But I also think they're trying to figure out who the hell this guy is. I mean, you look at like CNN's K-File, they do such great work finding these old writings of these politicians. And they've got Mike Johnson nailed. I mean, they didn't have to look that hard to find out just what an extremist he is when it comes to things like abortion, when it comes to things like, no-fault divorce, when it comes to things like porn. He's basically Jerry Falwell, without the son and the pool boy and all that good stuff, as far as we know.
Exactly. As far as we know, it's so crazy how often it happens. We just assume. But back to that news item. I mean, what's interesting is that he's trying to defend criminals against police. Yeah. I mean, imagine that. Imagine doing that with like any other criminal. Like, well, we don't want the police, in this case, Department of Justice, the FBI are police. And yet the other thing is the DOJ already has those unedited tapes. So do every media outlet, probably. I mean, have access or close to access to most of it. So it's a weird thing. He's just saying it because obviously DOJ has the right? I think I'm right about that.
So then you ask, like, well, okay, who's he sending a message to? Who's he trying to wink and nod at to make sure they know that he's on their side? Well, the people who came to the Capitol and the orange motherfucker down in Florida who sent him there, right? Yeah. I mean, to me, that's the most unsettling part. It's not so much that it is that he's trying to protect these people from prosecution, but also that he wants them to know that he's an ally of theirs.
Let me ask you two last questions here, Sam. Your just overall general thoughts on the Biden campaign, your concerns, your thoughts. I mean, the primaries aren't too far away. He's obviously the incumbent president. Whether people think that he should step down now and somebody else should step up for him is not really, it doesn't really matter, I don't think, because it doesn't look like to any extent he's going anywhere. So your thoughts about, the campaign for Biden Harris and, how they're positioned right now and how it looks before we get to the Republican field, which we're going to have a debate tonight. So.
Yeah, I'm of two minds on Joe Biden. One, he's one of the best presidents of my lifetime. His jobs record, especially after a once in a century pandemic, is unparalleled. The way he's rebuilt the judiciary to make it look more like America is something that we should applaud. The way he's focused on rebuilding the economy from the middle out is just, it's one of the most remarkable things I've seen in my lifetime. I've never seen a president this pro-union before. Having said all of that, every single conversation I have with people who don't follow this stuff closely, they bring up the same thing every time, his age. And, for me, it becomes a question of how does the White House get around that? Can they get around that? And when it comes down to it, are voters going to say, well, I'll take the insurrectionist over the old guy? I don't know the answer to that. We're an image obsessed people. And for whatever reason, this is the issue that right now America has decided to fixate on. Personally, I don't agree. I think he's doing a great job. But there's no question it's something they're going to have to figure out. Yeah. I don't think, him stepping aside is the move, because what do? You open up basically Pandora's box of, 30 different Democrats running for president with 30 different constituencies. And we start looking a lot like Republicans, just tearing each other apart. So to me, he is, even though it may not look like it, the great unifier in our party right now. And I just hope they can find a way to solve this age issue, because for so many people, it really is an issue.
Do you think the Arab-Israeli conflict affects the presidential election a year from now, whether it's, Democrats who are also Arab Muslim? You've seen this movement. I don't know how big of a deal it is of moving away from him, or Jewish Americans or pro-Israeli Americans that are going to think he's somehow, been too lenient or something. Like, do you think a year from now that will animate voters? It's hard to know, but what are your thoughts at this point?
Right. Well, I think anytime there's unrest or chaos in the world, voters tend to take it out on the incumbent. In terms of the specific Israel-Hamas war, buddy, I don't know. I mean, gosh, trying to guess what the world's going to look like a year from now is a more impossible task now than it's ever been. We have pandemics now. We have game show host presidents now. We have attacks on the Capitol now. I have no idea what the hell is going to happen next week. Hell, I thought Kevin McCarthy would still be around, and that ain't happening. So, I mean, trying to guess what voters are going to be animated about a year from now, I just can't tell you. My great hope is that there's not still a war raging a year from now, that a year from now, innocent people aren't dying and, Israel is still protecting itself. That's my hope. Yeah. But in terms of what voters are going to be mad about or what grudges they're going to be carrying, it's so impossible for me to say right now.
I think that's the best, rightest answer. And yet I'm going to ask you to make another prediction. Republicans tearing each other apart. They certainly haven't really teared each other, rather Trump apart in the run for president. You're going to have these four people on stage. Actually, is Chris Christie there tonight? Do we know?
I believe so. Yeah, I think it's four.
Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis will be on stage. Only Chris Christie has really gone after Trump. And Trump seems to still be way out ahead. But I've asked all the people whose opinion I respect, do you think there's any way any of the other people could win Iowa, New Hampshire, and somehow, actually get the nomination?
No, I mean, we stopped talking about a political party a long time ago.
Yeah.
There may be 40% of the Republican Party that would like to see an alternative, but that 40% will absolutely vote for Donald Trump in the end. Look, Chris Christie has made the strongest effort to differentiate himself. Ron DeSantis, old pudding fingers, he's tried recently. He's been questioning Trump's, mental acuity. He's been, lobbing some real attacks, but they're just not going anywhere. One, because Ron DeSantis might be the most unlikable son of a bitch on the planet. It doesn't matter what his message is because the messenger sucks. It's amazing to me that people ever thought this guy could be the nominee or ever thought he could be president because he's one of the worst candidates I've ever seen. I guess the person to watch, and, look, I don't have Beltway fever, so I'm not like pretending like she's got a chance in hell to win this thing. But what does Nikki Haley do tonight? Does she...
Yep.
Does she, continue to try and, walk that line of, well, I'm a pro-Trump person, but here are the problems with him? Or, I guess, maybe it makes the Washington Post editorial board happy to see her, pretending to be a solid second place candidate, but I just don't see it.
I love that last part. A small dig at Wash Poe. Okay, well, finally, have you used today's big stuff? Do you think you should use the power of today's big stuff? Forgive me if I haven't seen it. To take a hot steaming dump on the no labels people?
We have from time to time, but I feel like now that you've given me the idea, we really need to concentrate and make sure that dump is large and noticeable.
Yeah.
Because, Joe Lieberman, just for your viewers' information, I was a campaign reporter for a long time. I did 4 years at the White House and 3.5 presidential campaigns. The half is Rand Paul. But Joe Lieberman was the first presidential candidate who knew my name. It was my first presidential, he moved into New Hampshire where I was based and, just the friendliest guy in the world. And then that same campaign, Al Gore, his former running mate, came out and endorsed Howard Dean. And I think just like electing a black president broke a lot of brains, that broke Joe Lieberman's brain. A couple years later, I'm in Connecticut and I'm covering Joe Lieberman losing a primary to Ned Lamont. And again, that brain just broke a little more. I don't think Joe Lieberman's animated by anything more these days than bitterness, because for most of these guys, it comes down to personal grudges.
After he lost that primary race, he was the incumbent senator and and Ned Lamont beat him in the Democratic primary. Didn't he then run as an independent?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, Joey Lieberman. It's always.
But people might not read between the lines. Like when you lose the nomination and then run as an independent in general in history, who does that?
Yeah, no, it's a total sore loser move. But, they used to call them the three amigos, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Joe Lieberman.
Right.
Of the three of those, you say easily John McCain was the most principled, Lindsey Graham, the least principled, and then Joe Lieberman sort of floating in between. And, it's, I don't know, it's disappointing. I feel like there's so much no labels is just one, corruption, and two, just ego driven.
Yeah. And a political party that does not disclose who is giving them money. How about that?
Yeah, and they want Joe Manchin to be their standard bearer. Okay, fine. Let's spend the next year talking about why he didn't want to extend the child tax credit. Let's spend the next year talking about how he's been lining his pockets the whole time he's been in the Senate. Let's spend the next year talking about how he's doomed the planet to death. You want to do that? Okay, let's do that.
If you could have a drink with any United States senator right now, who would it be?
Oh, gosh. Well, I should tell you, I quit drinking a long time ago.
That's right. We talked about your sobriety here.
Yeah. I think Tammy Baldwin seems really cool. But I'll tell you the truth. I am a big time Elizabeth Warren fan and always have been. She's one of those handful of politicians. I remember being there the first time I heard her speak. And it was long before, she was a candidate, or even long before she was at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I just found her to be a very dynamic speaker who seemed to care a lot about working people. And, that's kind of my jam.
I would ask you which senator you would most like to punch in the face, but I don't condone violence or promote it. But after I hit stop, I do want to know who you think's face is the most punchable. So,
that
we'll only allow like premium subscribers to ever find out that answer. It's a way to promote my Patreon.
I don't want to get my ass whooped by a wimp like Josh Hawley, so I better just stay out of that.
Exactly. That's why I never fight, because it was just so. I got knocked out by a homeless guy on the street, and then a couple weeks later, I saw that guy again with my friend. I was like, "That's a dude that knocked me out," and my buddy's like, "Let's go get him." I was like, "No way, dude! The humiliation of getting knocked out by the same poor fella twice is too much. It was already bad enough. No, thank you. Hello, sir. Need any change?"
But Mitch McConnell, one of his favorite sayings is that there's no education in the second kick of a mule, which if you speak Mr. Burns, that means, the first time you get kicked by a donkey, okay. The second time you get kicked by a donkey, that's your fault. You didn't learn anything the first time.
I was hoping you would end with a Mitch McConnell quote.
Well, I'll say this. There is one Mitch McConnell quote I think we should all listen to, and that is, there are people who want to make a point, and there are people who want to make a difference. And the way you make a difference is by winning elections. So maybe that should be the first focus for all of us.
Thank you very much, as always, Sam, for joining me. Great stuff, as always.
Pete, this is a blast. Thanks so much, man. I love your show.
Yeah, love having you on the show. Sam Youngman, everybody. What'd you think? Go subscribe to Today's Big Stuff right now. I can't say enough good things about it. He's not paying me. We have no partnership, nothing. I'm just truly, authentically a big fan of his and Adam Parkhomenko's and the work that they're doing there each and every day. I think it's great. I think it matters. I get informed, I get entertained, and they channel a lot of the anger and emotion that many of us feel on a pretty regular basis. So that, I think, is cathartic and helpful to know that you're not alone in feeling those feelings. Okay, that's all I've got for you. And thank you very much for tuning in today. Go write a review on Spotify or iTunes. That matters a lot. Sign up for a paid subscription if you haven't. Pay more if you'd like. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Hope to see you at tonight's hangout. And that is it. Be the change you want to see in the world. Love you guys. See you tonight, I hope. John Carroll. Hope he's there. Sing us out right now and every day.
I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience. change to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.